Okay, as people continue to stream in, I will welcome you all to Politics and Prose, to PNP Live rather. I'm Chelsea Lake, and I'm a member of the events team at Politics and Prose Bookstore. I'd like to welcome you to PNP Live. Before we get started, a few housekeeping notes. At any point during the event, you can click on the link that will be dropped in the chat to purchase We Are Not Like Them. You can ask a question by clicking on Q&A, which can be found in the menu at the bottom of your screen. We are also delighted to offer closed captioning for this event via Zoom's auto captioning service. To access those captions, just click on Live Transcript, which is at the bottom of your screen as well. It is now my pleasure to introduce this evening's speakers. Christine Pride is a writer, editor, and longtime publishing veteran. She's held editorial posts at many different trade imprints, including Doubleday, Broadway, Crown, Hyperion, and Simon Schuster. As an editor, Christine has published a range of books with a special emphasis on inspirational stories and memoirs. As a freelance editorial consultant, she does select editing and proposal content development, as well as teaching and coaching. She pens a regular column, Race Matters, for Cup of Joe. Jo Piazza is an award-winning journalist, editor, and podcast host. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, CNN, Marie Claire, Glamour, and more. She is also the author of Charlotte Walsh Likes to Win, How to Be Married, The Knockoff, Fitness Junkie, and If Nuns Ruled the World. Piazza and Pride will be in conversation with Sarah Pekkanen. She's the internationally and USA Today bestselling author of several novels, including The Wife Between Us, The Perfect Neighbor, and The Best of Us. A former investigative journalist and feature writer, her work has been published in The Washington Post and USA Today. Please join me in welcoming everyone to PNP Live. Take it away.
I am so excited to be here with you guys for so many reasons. I mean, what a week you all have had. And a deep breath, because I think it's going to go on for a while. I don't think this is going to let up anytime soon, this incredible reception to your book. I have a million questions, but let's start with a relatively simple one. Tell me a little bit about your book. Tell everybody a bit about your book, if you can summarize it.
Yeah, sure. So We Are Not Like Them is a novel about lifelong best friends, two women named Riley and Jen. Jen's a white woman and Riley's a Black woman. And when we open the book, they're older, they're in their early 30s, and Jen's husband, a Philadelphia police officer, shoots an unarmed Black teenager. And Riley is the television newscaster who has to cover this tragic event. And for the first time in their lives, in their relationship, they have to talk about race in a way that they just never have before. And this incident sparks some really uncomfortable conversations. And you don't know until the very end whether or not this friendship is going to make it through.
Wonderful. So a timely, important book. It does not shy away from difficult topics. Before we get to a little bit more of that, tell everybody how you guys connected. I've read a bit about your origin story. It has some interesting twists involving younger, and it's an amazing story in itself. So talk about how you two came together, came to be friends, and decided to write together.
Well, our meet cute, as we call it. And it's funny because you'll relate to it, Sarah, since we met in a similar way as you and your writing partner, Greer. But I was Joe's editor at Simon Schuster. I was still working there full time when we started the book. But I worked with her in her novel, Charlotte Walsh Likes to Win. And we just had this amazing connection. I mean, both creatively, working together on that particular project, but also that spark when you meet somebody where you feel like, oh my gosh, this person could be a friend, right? Like we have so much in common, we have so much fun together, and not just working together, but hanging out together. And then we did another project that was a tie-in to the TV show Younger. I'm sure there are some Younger fans out there since it's set in publishing. And so I was publishing Marriage Vacation, which is a book that we published in real life at Simon Schuster that was published on the show. And I needed somebody to write it very quickly. And Joe was very fast. And it gave us another excuse to work together. And so we turned around that book in like 4 weeks over a holiday. And so all the editorial author walls kind of just broke down, right? Because it was just like the two of us in a Google Doc, working around the clock to get this book done by deadline. And so when that was done, this would now be spring 2018, we thought, we want to work together on something else. And I had this idea kicking around for a while, mainly as thinking with my editor hat, right? Again, I was still at Simon Schuster full time. And so I was like, this would be a really interesting book, right? An interracial friendship between a Black woman and a white woman that's, really tested or upended by a police shooting. I should find someone to write that book. And then I started talking to Joe about it, and it sort of pivoted to, we should write this book. And by writing it together, bringing our unique perspectives and experiences and observations to the table as a Black woman and a white woman, that we could write this book to be richer, more authentic, and just a better book than if either of us tried to write it on our own. And so we dove in.
Yep. And thus began a 3-year writing relationship that culminated in being the Good Morning America book club pick.
Huge congratulations. I mean, what a moment. Tell us about that. Like, how did you guys get the news? What were you doing? Did you run around the house screaming like, were you driving carpool? Like, what, was it totally?
The story is actually awesome because I was heading to Christine's house and we were going to do like final book edits. And this was like almost 6 months ago. We've been keeping this secret for 6 months. Such a long time. And I was stuck in the subway and I was getting all these texts like, call me from like our from Christine, because they wanted to tell us when we were together, but they couldn't get in touch with me. And so they told Christine. I finally like come running, like huffing into her apartment. And I'm like, what happened? And she's like, we're the Good Morning America book club pick. And, they're like, you're sworn to secrecy. You're not supposed to tell anyone. And we immediately went out to dinner and had so many tequila drinks and told the bartender at the restaurant. And then told no one else.
But you can't tell anybody.
You can't, Tiffany, you can't.
Bartenders are really good at keeping secrets. I think
exactly.
So good. And so that's how we found out. And we've just like been dying since then to be able to tell someone. And so yesterday, the book's picture was on a billboard in Times Square. Just crazy.
It was very surreal. It was a very surreal 24 hours, but exciting and fun. So it's so different when you have a book that is theoretical for so long, right? And then it crosses a line and then it's out in the world. And so the last 24 hours where it's gone from kind of an abstraction, like this is going to happen. There's a lot of anticipation and buildup to it being actually a real thing. I didn't know it was going to feel like such a shift, this is my first time doing this. Joe's a pro, you're a pro, but it's fun.
It is. I mean, you never get used to it. That kind of, this has been in my head, like this has been conversations. And then suddenly like people have opinions on it and people are reading it, like it's out in the world and it's like great and exciting and scary and thrilling. And it's all of those things. And the reception has been so great. I mean, you guys have been interviewed in People. I see like in the UK, you're being, really, people are just responding, to this book. It just is something I think is striking so many conversations. So talk a little bit more about that, like your process. Once I get over the fact that you said you wrote a book together in 4 weeks, I'm going to cry along with every other writer in the world in the corner right now. But your process for writing this, it must have taken a lot longer than 4 weeks, and you used a Google Doc. And I know
not at first.
Okay, take us through it. Yeah.
No, I dragged Christine kicking and screaming into the world of Google Docs. She was like, we're just going to write this in a Word document and trade that back and forth, and we'll number it or something. And I'm like, no, my friend. And so that was our first fight. And Christine did end up switching to Google Docs. And, in the beginning, we kind of fell into our old roles of editor and writer. And so I would tackle the blank page, then Christine would go in and rip the entire thing up. But then as we got more comfortable, we would just feel inspiration at so many different times. So, 3 a.m. for Christine, in the shower for me, and then we text each other. We have this long ongoing text chain of, I'm going in the dock. And it's like, okay, great. Let me know when you're out. And so we just kind of kept layering things on top of each other until we had a book.
And I think a lot of people will assume that I wrote the Black character and Joe wrote the white character. And that was sort of how our process works, going back and forth, because the book is told in these two alternating perspectives. And that's not the case. I mean, we really were, both of us, involved in, all of the development, all of the sentences, all of the structuring, everything. Well, at the same time, drawing upon our personal experiences, right? That's why we wanted to write this book together. But we wanted it to feel like a book that was written by one person, that it wouldn't be jarring, that there was like a cohesive narrative voice to it. That was really important to us.
Definitely. And that came across too. I mean, so, I figured you guys must have both written, both sections, right? Both characters' points of view, because it did feel very cohesive. You succeeded in that. But I know writing and talking about difficult things that, close friends don't always talk about, from different races. What was that like? You said there was one point at which you were both in tears. Are you?
Oh, more than one.
Oh,
yeah. It was hard.
It was hard. Yeah. I mean, one thing that we want to acknowledge, before people go into this book, is talking about race is hard. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to write this, was, to sympathize with people that it's hard, and also maybe give them some shorthand to have these conversations themselves with others, with family members, with friends, with book clubs. And, going into this, we had never talked about race because we were new friends and we were professional friends. And then it was trial by fire of really getting into these difficult conversations of, and sometimes I would get defensive, and then Christine's reaction to that is frustration. And there were a lot of times we're like, oh my gosh, maybe we can't do this together. Maybe writing a book about race with our interracial friendship is too hard. Maybe we'll destroy our friendship if we keep going.
But also, I think the flip side to that is, we had to go, book aside, if you're going to have an interracial friendship, then you have to go there. I mean, I think that that's really the lesson that we learned, and, one that we want to impart on other people, which is why we talk about our personal relationship as much as we talk about our characters on the page, because there's a lot of, art imitating life and vice versa in that way. And, I'd always maintained, as a Black woman, that you really can't have a close friendship with a person of another race unless you are able to talk about these things, unless there is some trust there built up that I can go to you and share. And the fear, I think a lot of Black people have been doing that is, what is the reaction I'm going to be met with, right? Is it defensiveness, as Joe mentioned, or is it dismissiveness, or is it going to be that, the person burst into tears and is almost more upset than you are about whatever you're talking about, right? And so you have to kind of steel yourself for those reactions and wade into it anyway and hope you get out on the other side. And, as Joe said, there's just fear on both sides. And so we had to really push through that. And that was a process. That was a journey. That was not something that happened overnight. And so that's also something we tell people. This is not, just like one conversation and it's a kumbaya moment and all is well. 3 years in, we're still talking and growing and learning and, confronting things as it comes up. And that's just, unavoidable, but also meaningful.
Yeah, I mean,
I think our friendship is stronger for it too. I think we're much better friends now. We're much, we have a lot more fun together because we did something really hard that we did not enjoy all the time. Like I think we do. We have a lot more fun than we used to.
Yeah. And without those hard conversations, you can't have the intimacy in the friendship. I mean, how can somebody be close to you when you're not talking about this?
One thing that has been so surprising to us, or at least I'll speak for myself, to me, is that we knew that people wanted to have these conversations or were curious about these conversations. And we also know that most people do not have a friend of another race to have these conversations with, right? I mean, there's a statistic that we always talk about where 75% of white people do not, have a friend of another race. So it would be hard for these conversations to happen. But what's really been surprising to me, and especially now that the book is in the world and people are reacting to it and sharing their personal experiences, how many people are in an interracial relationship and still not talking about these things, whether it be a friendship or a marriage. I mean, we were at an event last night and, the moderator said that she's a white woman who was married to a Black man for 10 years, and said, we didn't talk about race, which is, sort of mind blowing to me at least, but I think shows the need for this book more than ever, right? Like this is a tool that people can use to open that door and have these conversations.
Absolutely. It is something that, I think could be a gift. A friend can give it to another friend and say, what do you think? And maybe that's the way to open the door and start having the tough conversations and the important conversations. Yeah.
We hope so. I mean, that's what we want this book to do, right? And this can be a subject that's hard to broach, right? You're not just going to go up to somebody and say, let's talk about race, or even the headlines can be so polarizing, right? It's so much easier to sit down and talk about a book that features a police shooting as a plot point, right? Because there's one level of, distance. It's very different to talk about an actual headline that's happening, right? That just feels like there's a different weight and stakes to it. And so even if the same conversations might unfold, this is a way and a way that's not threatening, that you could even bring it up to a coworker, right? In a way that maybe you're not talking about race at work, but you can talk about this book that you read at work. And so we're hoping that there's different avenues.
Absolutely, an entry point, into deeper conversations as well, and personal conversations. Yeah. Well, so let's talk about the Google Docs, which I'm also and so can you, I know people are always so interested in process and with co-authors, it's, you kind of have to make up your own. So how did you do it? How did you set the schedule? How long did it take? Like what little quirks of working together? Greer and I learned so much about each other. I'd be like, oh, she's getting her groceries delivered. Of course, it's Tuesday at 10. The little dogs are barking. And, she'd say, oh, Dylan's getting home from school. Like we just knew each other's lives so intimately. What about you all? What was it like for you two?
Christine is usually the first person that texts me when I wake up in the morning. And often the last person that texts me at night. One of the reasons that I think this collaboration worked so well is that we both have the same work ethic. Like we're both incredibly hardworking. We're both always on. We know the other one is always going to be there to pick up the slack or just to put in the hours. So really, it's been like an around the clock process for the two of us. And we were also living on different coasts for a lot of this. I was in San Francisco. Christine was in New York. I was pregnant and then giving birth for most of it. So yeah, we did we were together so much, but then not together, which was a little strange.
I think we had different writing processes at different points too, because since it was so much of it was distant, a lot of it, which I know is just having talked to Greer about your guys' collaboration, is a little bit different in that we weren't in touch constantly, voice to voice, face to face throughout the process. A lot of our conversation happened in the Google Doc, like in comments or in text, right? So it was like ongoing. And then we would have these moments at critical times, where we'd say, okay, now we'll sit down together on the phone for 2 hours, or, you know, we would block chunks of time to go over, okay, this section or this, like things that had to be talked through. And so it was like work kind of independently, and then come together, and work independently, and then come together. And that is I don't know, when you say, Joe, that's like the process we settled into kind of organically. Like we didn't set out and say, okay, this is how it's going to work, and these are the hours we're going to work, and this is, you know, we didn't have a plan. We sort of figured it out as we went along, and we settled into rhythm that worked for us.
Yeah, we winged it in the beginning.
Yeah. We sure did.
We sure did, and ended up working for us. But yeah, like it was just really, you know, whenever inspiration struck one of us, and you know, our strengths are different too. I can do plot all day long, and I think it's because I've been a reporter for most of my life, so I'm good with like action, like cohesive action. And Christina's much better at like emotional depth and like building up a character. So that was nice too, to, you know, be able to play to our strengths.
Yeah, take the best of both of your talents and blend them together. Yeah, I'd say it definitely worked out for you guys.
Worked out, yeah.
A billboard in Times Square, come on. So what is next for you guys? I mean, I feel like, you know, when a book comes out, it's almost like, you know, you give birth and they're like, oh, when are you having another one? You know, and you're kind of like, oh my God, just let me, you know, recover. And but what is next for you guys?
We're back in the Google Doc.
Yeah. We're writing the next book. We're about 100 pages into the next book. And this one will also tackle race and how it affects our intimate relationships, but with a completely different storyline.
Very intriguing. Okay.
No, I don't think we're allowed to say more. Yeah.
There's a reader reminded us of this, that we did this even, that there's a fun Easter egg or teaser in We Are Not Like Them that is related to our second book. So that's kind of a fun thing to put out there and see if anybody can guess it.
Interesting. All right. I'm going to have to go back and look.
This is just an excuse to make all of our readers read it again. We're like, go back in there and read it again. Oh boy.
that and the recipe for miracle bread. I feel like that.
One of our followers made miracle bread over the weekend and posted pictures of it, and it was amazing.
It's amazing.
Is it a real thing? Does somebody actually make that? And that's how it.
No, we completely
made it up.
We never even made it. But every time I reread that section, I'm so hungry.
So hungry. It sounds so good.
It looked good though when she made it. I mean, the bacon bit.
Right, the bacon. You've got the salty and the sweet and the butter.
Ooh, delicious. Okay, so this is probably a question you guys get too, and you have to have thought about this. Who would play the different characters in a movie?
Oh yeah, well, no, we've thought about it. We're also about to start our talks, right? About turning this into a TV limited series or a movie. We've been very set on Janelle Monáe as Riley for some time. And we've said that in every interview, to the extent that I think that we may be really creepy at this point, because we're like, hey, Janelle, are you out there? And yeah, so she's probably just like, get this book away from me. Why
do these random women keep talking about me? We're manifesting, Janelle. We're manifesting.
Yeah, we're manifesting. Call us, Janelle. And we have tossed around the idea. We like the idea of Kristen Bell for Jen. And we actually haven't gotten past that, but I feel like casting the secondary characters would be a lot of fun too. So we should do that soon.
Good, yeah. There are a lot of people in the book, so we have a lot of casting decisions.
A lot of casting decisions, all of which will obviously be up to us.
They always are for the writers, right?
Always.
So much control.
But you mentioned you're about to start the talks for a limited series. So can you say more? I don't know what process you're in right now.
Yeah, no, we're just about to start meeting with different producers and directors. And our goal is to find someone who's as passionate about this subject as we are, And our biggest dream, I mean, even beyond who stars in it, is to have a very diverse group making this. So like, we would love to see a white and black directing team or a white and black producing team, so that, you know, in the same way that Christine and I had to grapple with the words on the page, they'll have to have the same conversations about the visual medium. So that's our big dream that we are trying to manifest right now.
Mhm.
So exciting. I mean, this is like, you know, one of the things that when you're writing the book, like, you just fantasize, you know, what if, you know, somebody in Hollywood's interested in it? Sounds like you guys have a lot of interest. So congrats on that. I can't wait to see it.
Thank you. It is exciting. It's exciting.
It's all good things. And, you know, I mean, you know how it is too, when you're in the thick of it with your launch week and you're just like, oh my, like it's like a blur. It's like your wedding almost. And so we're trying, it's nice that there's two of us, because we're trying to remind each other to like sit back and enjoy it. And like last night, you know, drink all the champagne and then order midnight.
I was supposed to be reminding Joe to drink more water last night when I should have been taking that lesson myself.
My job with Greer all the time. I'm like, you have to drink your water. And I'm always getting shit.
Yeah. No, Christine completely dropped the ball.
I totally did.
Totally. In fact, you kept bringing me more drinks.
That is true. That is an actual fact.
That's
And they were not water.
It was not water. No.
But I mean, all kidding aside, it really is. I've never written a book before, obviously, and Joe has done this a million times, as have you. But I would imagine it would be a very lonely process. I mean, the reason I love being an editor so much is, you know, it's so interactive. Like, you really are working with somebody, and that's just, you know, dynamic and interesting and fun, and, you know, not lonely. And so that the writing itself, you know, the collaboration, just was more fun, I think. But now that we're on, you know, on the other side and doing events and interviews and stuff, that is also more fun to do with somebody else. And so, you know, it's working for us.
100%. Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's fun to have somebody to share the highs and the lows.
And the lows.
Yeah.
And the lows.
Yeah, for sure. So how has this, well, I actually have so many questions. I'm going to backtrack a little bit. So Joe, one of the things for me when I went from writing solo books to collaborating with Greer was that I was used to, I came up in newsrooms too. So I was used to writing under any conditions. Like, I would be on the, you know, sideline of a soccer field. I wrote part of my first book in Chuck E. Cheese. It was like, you know, whenever I had 10 minutes and could put on, you know, acoustic rock, I was good.
Yeah.
But it was all brain to fingertips. It was just purely internal. And one of the great things that happened when I began to work with Greer is that I had to learn how to articulate what I wanted to write.
Yes.
And it was frustrating at first, because I'd be like, my fingers just want to go. But like, you know, you can't do that. You've got to get the words out, and just kind of reconciling the image you have in your head that you know you can write with the whole, you know, other, you know, effort of verbalizing it. It was almost like learning a new language. Did you experience that?
Oh my God, yeah. And, you know, same. I could write anywhere, right? Like, I was always on the go as a reporter. I'd like just sit down in the airport, plug in the phone in a bathroom, and just type away, right? But I say, after doing this together, Christine and I could write an entire book on communication. And that would be, I think, very useful for married couples, to be honest, because in the same way, you can have this idea in your head of like, when I put things on the stairs, I want my husband to carry them up the stairs. Or like, when we're out of milk, I would like him to go buy it. But if you don't verbalize it, nothing is going to get carried up the stairs. And you have to learn to use that muscle, how to verbalize what you want and what you want done, as you said, what you want to see on the page. And that was another learning curve for me. Christine's big learning curve was Google Docs. I was learning how to tell her like how to get the words out instead of just putting them on the page. I dropped a bomb on Christine right before we were about to turn the final novel in. It was originally written in close third person. And I called her and I was like, "Are you sitting down?"
And that was the only warning I got. Are you sitting down? When it should have been, pour yourself a drink, sit down, do a 5-minute meditation. I needed a little more preparation before what she was about to tell me. And I think it was like 11 p.m. at night. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
What is going on?
Yeah. And I was like, I think we need to rewrite the entire book in first person. And she was like, well, excuse me?
What?
I was like, yeah.
Say what?
I'm like, the whole
I just hung up the phone. I was like, sorry, wrong number. No,
but I was like, come on. I was like, please, I'm like, just give me a chance. I really think it'll be better. Let me write. I'll do the first 2 chapters and read it and tell me what you think. And the book is first person. So
it was the right decision. Well, partly it was the right decision because even in third person, we had still some distance with our characters and, you know, sort of the authorial voice, if you will. And one thing that was important to us to get across in this book, and especially capitalizing on our different perspectives, was to bring alive the things that I hear and experience in all Black spaces that Joe would never be privy to, and that Joe will hear and experience in all white spaces, you know, things that people would never say in front of me. And then when we could bring that to the table, that almost had to be in first person, because then it's like the what you hear, what you think, and what you say, and who you say it to can be very different things, right? And so we could really explore that in a way that was more limiting in third person. And I think that really opened up a lot of the conflict and the friction, because what's more interesting than knowing what a character thinks and then seeing him or her say or do something different than that? And then you ask yourself, you know, why? What are the motivations here? And when that's about race, right, we really start witnessing and learning something that we couldn't do in real life.
Right, the way people edit themselves. I think that's I think that absolutely is the right call. You said that so beautifully. I think that's an important point. And making those choices about voice. I mean, I remember we did this with our second book. We wrote the first chapter from, you know, first, third, and second person.
Wow.
Finally,
let's just throw it all out there and see what happens.
Like just so we you know, it's hard to know sometimes, and it is so frustrating when you get to the end of the book and you're like, it would have been so much easier to make a course correction like 300 pages ago, and now we've got to go back. But I mean, that's the stuff that, you know, makes your book go to the next level. And
it's part of the process. I think we had to do it, but like we couldn't have gotten there otherwise, right? Like sometimes you have to write these scenes, or you have to write your way into things, and it feels like it's wasted time or energy, but it's not. Like you couldn't have gotten there otherwise, even if you scrap those 30 pagers or that, even that whole character, you know, you needed that as a bridge to get to something else.
Yeah.
And that happened with our first chapter too. I mean, Joe and I really,
oh my gosh,
like struggled so much with there's a prologue in the book, but the first chapter is Riley's chapter, and we really just rewrote and then would write more and then come back. And we always joke like Riley's gym bag. There's like this vestige of, which is not in the current version, but like there's this vestige of Riley going to the gym that was like in there forever and then not in there. Riley also at one point had 4 brothers who no longer exist. So,
with the brothers.
Like too many brothers.
I love hearing sort of the outtakes, you know.
Yeah.
That didn't make the gym bag. That's, you know what I mean? So, and as an editor, so Christine, here's one of the things I didn't know. I imagined, you know, before I really got to know Greer, that editors like spent all day in their office reading manuscripts. We're like, you know, had a giant red pen and were just like slashing them up, and, you know, didn't really want to be disturbed often. But that is a very small fraction of your job. Like, let's talk a little bit about, because I think people are so fascinated. It's almost like this kind of secret world of publishing. Can you talk about all the different hats you wear as an editor?
Yeah. I mean, I wish it was all, I think people have this dream that it's like you're drinking tea in a book-lined office and reading submissions, and, you know, it's very quaint, and it's not like that at all. I wish. And the book-lined offices are like terribly drab places in Midtown. And all the reading, frankly, happens at night on the weekends. You're not doing that in the office, because when you're in the office, frankly, like every other corporate job, you're going to a lot of meetings. So much of being an editor, I mean, there's definitely the finding new talent part, which is the exciting part of the job, right? Going out and finding new voices, or reading submissions from agents that come in and signing up great books, like no question about that. And then editing those books so that they're the best possible book that can be, and helping a writer take their craft to the next level. So that's a good, portion of the job. But from there, it's really like you're a project manager. I mean, you put on this hat to really figure out the machine of how you're going to get this product that now you've completed into the hands of readers. And that involves a lot of coordination with other departments, right? Like working with publicity, working with marketing, working with cover design, working with production, right? On all of the moving parts of actually producing a physical product. And so you're the team leader managing all of this. And that's what all the meetings are about. So you're really, going to meetings all day long is really what happens, which are, I mean, some of them are fun meetings. Cover meeting tends to be a meeting that is not as fun as other meetings. It's a very fraught meeting a lot of the times, because covers are so subjective, right? People are like, I hate purple, let's not do that, or I hate this font, and you can't exactly articulate why you do or don't like something, or why a reader out there will pick up this cover or that cover, right? A lot of it is intuitive, and so in that way, there can be just differences of opinions. Luckily, we did not have that with our books. We just loved our cover, and everybody loved our cover from the start.
We're so obsessed with it. I'm going to show it on the screen.
Yeah, show us.
Yeah.
It's so bright and vibrant, and rarely is there a jacket, and I'm sure you've experienced there, where there's, everybody loves it from the beginning, no tweaks, no changes, agents, in-house, authors, there's like an immediate passion and consensus. And that's a really rare thing to happen. So we feel really lucky in that way too.
Yeah, they hit it out of the park. I mean, that is a fantastic cover. It just jumps out at you. We had that with The Wife Between Us. Like we had no idea what the cover was going to be. And, if you had said to us, oh, it's going to be an image of, two blonde women on the cover, we would have been like, really? And they sent it to us, and we both stared at it and were like, this is perfect. It's so creative, the way the faces are done. And our brilliant editor, Jen Enderlin, said, oh yeah, I sketched that out, one day.
She did? I didn't know that.
And like just casually years later, like among the
wow, things, I've never done that for a book in all my entire editorial career. I've never sketched out a cover.
Oh my gosh. So how are you guys dividing your time now? Are you guys full speed ahead writing the next book? Are you working on other projects on the side? What's going on in your day-to-day life?
We're taking a break right now to usher this book into the world. And we're so passionate about getting it in as many hands as possible, and to starting so many conversations. We think this book is such a wonderful book club read, because it's like you're really going to have something to talk about. It is going to spark so many conversations, but also a really great buddy read. Like, we've heard from a lot of people that they're buying 2 copies and giving it to either a close friend or someone they're not that close with, so that they can open up new conversations, which we think is awesome. And so we're all here for that. I have this crazy idea that I haven't even discussed with Christine yet. I'll bring it up right now. And she's just like, oh,
here we go.
Are you sitting down, Christine? Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Pour yourself.
I'm detoxing today, so I'm not even going to have, a drink here. So
I'll drink for you. Okay.
We're both detoxing today. Well, I also love the idea, I was reading the comments in Christine's Cup of Joe column. She wrote a column.
Oh, they're so good, right?
Came out yesterday, and I was replying to some of them, and some of these women were saying, there were some sad ones where it's like, I don't have a friend to talk to about this. I'm like, maybe we could match make buddy reads. Like, if someone's like, that's for like white women and Black women too. If a white woman's like, I don't have a Black friend that I could talk about this with, maybe we can pair up white and Black women to do a buddy read and then talk about the book. And that's a way to like possibly make a new interracial diverse friendship.
Because just to tell you guys what that column's about, I feel really fortunate that I have a really diverse friendship group. From growing up, some of my best friends are white, but I have two really close friends, including I think my best friend from first grade is on the Zoom tonight because she's in Bethesda. But we gathered together, so it was two white women, a biracial woman, a Latina woman, and two Black women, who are all of my friendship circle, to talk about how race has played out in our friendships. And so then I turned that into a column, and it has been really interesting to see that a lot of the comments are about longing for that. Like, how did you get such a diverse friendship group, and how did you get a group of friends that are willing to talk about these things? And again, my surprise in writing this book and now in publishing it and having these conversations out in the world is that people aren't having these conversations. I took it for granted because my friends and I always did. And so it's just been really interesting to see people say that they want to do that. And in a way, this book has such great timing, and that, we want to be a part of that. And we don't have time to write the other book right this second because we just want to be a part of all these conversations. Like, we're on Zooms all day long, just like talking to readers, and it's amazing.
I love the idea of buddy reads. So just a quick reminder to anybody watching that if you all have any questions, you can go ahead and type them in the question box, and we'll take those in a little bit. But before we do any of that, Joe and Christine, can you tell everybody how to follow you, whether social media, websites, whatever, and then maybe if this Buddy Reads turns into something, you'll be able to connect people.
Oh my God, we love that. Yeah, so the Instagram is probably the best way to keep up with us, and we're updating it, and events or giveaways a little bit. And so I'm at C Pride, so first initial and then last name PRIDE. And then I also have a website, christinepride.com.
Yeah, and I'm at Joe Piazza, author. And yeah, see, Christine, I'm now obsessed with my Buddy Reads idea.
I love it. I'm so
to buy 2 books, to buy one for you and a friend, or we're going to, it's Buddy Reads matchmaking. That's what we're going to do.
We've been getting so many great stories now that the book is in the world and people have read it, a little bit, and now we're reporting back, and sort of how it's impacted them, which is so gratifying. But there's a Black woman who read the book, and who had also read a piece that I did in Stylist about friendship with white people, and she cut off her white friend, after she felt like the friend said something that she found offensive or that hurt her in the wake of George Floyd's murder last summer. Admittedly, she was feeling like she was in a really raw place, and just has not talked to her since. And then she read this book and she said, you know what, I'm going to reach out to this friend. Like, I feel like I was probably sensitive and unfair, and this was like too categorical a response, and that maybe if we could have talked it through, we could have gotten to another place. And so now I'm obsessed with, that's all I know so far. I'm like, I know I need to know what happened. Did you call her? What did you guys talk about? So I'm hoping to get updates along the way. And I'm hoping that this has, if not a happy ending, whatever that looks like, but that, that both people are able to come to some, sort of common agreement or understanding.
Understanding, yeah. Wow. So Christine, you obviously write with your blog, and you've had articles published and all of that. Did you, what was the toughest part of getting into, this is your first, entrance into fiction, right? So what was the toughest part of that for you?
The blank page. Writing a book is really, really hard. I mean, it really is. And I should have known that after 20 years of publishing books. But I keep joking that I owe all my authors an apology, that I've just been so cavalier about what they've done, and, just dropping editorial letters on them, willy-nilly, and saying, have at it, and not really, understanding until you actually do it, what is involved, and the emotional component to it, like really feeling so frustrated sometimes, or vulnerable, and showing people your work, and leaving it up to them to judge it. Usually I'm the one doing the judging, right? Like I'm reading it and saying, what's working and what's not working. And so it was just a very different experience than I thought it was going to be. I do think that I was a little bit like, yeah, I can write a book. Yeah, yeah, sure. And I was like, oh shit, this is really hard.
I think he's going to be a much better editor for having done it, for having been on the other side. I mean, I think about that all the time because I also make podcasts, right? And I forced myself to learn, like I'm a host and I do all the reporting and the scripting, but I forced myself to learn the production process too. I'm not good at it, but I learned it so that I could talk to my producers better. So I would have the right language to talk to them through their process. And I feel like now you have the better language to talk to your writers.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think it's nice to see all aspects the same way that I think it's being an editor made me a better, or prepared me to be a writer in terms of, I had some sense of fundamentals. And I think now being a writer will help me be a better editor, and that I understand, like I said, the feelings involved a little more. I can put my therapist hat on a little more in working with in writers and coaching them through all the feelings and the ups and downs involved in the process.
Awesome. Well, we've got some questions here.
We love questions.
So Joe, do you want to take the first one? How did the concept change as you got going? What surprised you about this change?
Yeah, not a ton changed about the concept actually. And that surprised me the most because in a lot of my other books, the narrative does change as you're writing it. And one of the most hippy dippy things that I think is that a book tells you what it wants to be. So you start out in one place and then you end up in a completely different place. But this book was really fully formed from the start, from the very beginning. I mean, it was kind of like giving birth to a teenager. Yeah, just had to give it a little
back talk.
Yeah. Sometimes it would yell at us and be like, I hate you, I'm going to my room. And we'd have to give it some love. But that was the most surprising thing. We had a really robust outline going in. And we sold the book on a partial. So we had 100 pages and a robust outline. And not very much from that outline changed, I would say. And the interesting thing is, so we started writing this book in 2018. And at the time, there was actually kind of a lull between police shootings. We saw a rash of them as we started writing it. And then when we went to sell the book, there was a little bit of a lull. And we turned the book in, the final draft, and we were about ready to move into galleys a week before George Floyd was murdered. And then, everyone loses their minds in our publishing house. And we took the book back and we were like, all right, what is this book now? What does this mean? We knew we couldn't chase the news cycle. And we ended up changing some things. We made some tweaks, but it's still pretty much the same book, even in the wake of our racial reckoning that happened in 2020. Don't you think so, Christine?
Well, I think one of the biggest changes we made, without giving spoilers, was about Kevin's resolution. Like what happens in terms of the consequences for actions. And Joe and I did a ton of research for this book because we wanted it to be grounded in a lot of authenticity. And Joe's been a journalist for so long, and that just involved a lot of interviews. We interviewed cops, we interviewed cops' wives, we interviewed shooting victims. I mean, we interviewed Black cops and white cops, we got into it. And we knew all the statistics too, that there are rarely indictments or convictions in these situations. And then in the wake of George Floyd's murder, the country's, the whole mood of the country obviously changed, but there is a sense of a thirst for justice, and what is justice going to look like in this case, right, when we're talking about George Floyd. But that's a question that really permeates our book too. What is justice? What is going to make something right for each of the characters? What is going to make it right in the friendship? What is going to make it right society wise, right? What how can you mend? And so we made some tweaks along those lines to, I think, even though the book is set in 2019 and we wanted to keep it that way, but it satisfies, I think, more of a sense of like 2020 cultural zeitgeist and mood. And so that's one majorish change that we made.
Well said. Okay, and we have another question here. How often did you disagree on the path forward? And can you talk about how you solved those disagreements?
Should I go, Joe? We're like, who's, let's fight about who answers this question. It's interesting in writing a book and then writing a book about race is there's two levels of disagreements, right? Or let's say friction, right? There's like the creative disagreements that might happen if you're, as if we were writing a book about, two women on a road trip together that was not a fraught topic at all. But it's like, no, I think this character should do this. No, I think this character should do that. And there's even like coming down to writing or specific scenes. I mean, Joe and I, in terms of communication style, one thing that we really learned and that we started to employ and that we still use to this day is if something is like really important to you, like a line or a sentence or a character, it's like you have to verbalize that, like, no, that's important to me. We need to find a way to keep this in, right? And I don't know how many of those we each have. If there's an infinite number, we're like, we get 5 each per book, but that was important to us. And so that helped mitigate the friction. And then the next level was we were doing a lot of conversations about race, and that wasn't even so much disagreements in terms of the subject, but it was more like the elephant in the room, or like there was more hurt feelings involved, on both sides, or miscommunications or misunderstandings. And like we said, the only way we could get through that is to talk about it. I mean, there were days of stony silences and things like that, but we had to, legally we were committed to writing a book together, but we were also mission oriented about writing this book together. Like, we thought it was an important book. We knew what we wanted this book to do, and so we had to walk the walk, right? We had to practice what we preach. And so the only way to get there was to go through it. And so we had to force ourselves, even when we were, it was tense or awkward, that we would get back. This was pre-Zoom, so we didn't have to get back on a Zoom, but get back on the phone or in a Google Hangout and talk. And so we did. Over and over and over
and over and over again. You'd think we were sick of each other by now. I did actually request my own hotel room for Nashville.
That's what
I said, Joe, you tell our publicist you hate me. Go ahead. We
actually thought about messing with Fallon, our publicist, and telling her we got in a huge fight and we couldn't
we have a breakdown. We're not doing Good Morning America.
Yeah.
I know.
We'll do it separately. One thing that I didn't really even remember until we started doing these interviews, because maybe I kind of blocked it out, but I think this is a really interesting example of the things that are hard to talk about. So one of my biggest issues in the beginning was that I felt that our Black character, Riley, was a little bit too perfect, like annoyingly perfect, like Tracy Flick level perfect. And I hate a perfect character. I love hot messes and flawed characters because I think that makes them more human. And so, I'm like, all right, how can we mess her up a little bit? Like, can we give her like a little bit of a drinking problem? And actually, to be honest, Riley does drink a lot in the book, but can we?
On an empty stomach a lot, yes.
I love you notice that detail.
She's a busy lady. And
Riley, you have some toast.
Riley, you haven't eaten anything yet. And so I'm like, or, an affair with a married man, or maybe her parents are divorced, like, because the family also seemed super perfect too, right? Like, things that I would have done in any other book, like I did in Charlotte Walsh. I'm like, great, give the brother a drug addiction. And Christine pushed back on that because she was worried about a Black character being perceived differently with some of these like stereotypes that could be attached to a Black character. She's like, I don't want to make her an unwed mother. I don't want to, and I pushed back saying, but I would do this with a white character, and I have done this with a white character. And she's like, but it's different. And I couldn't see how it was different in the beginning. And then, I felt defensive and weird. And I was like, is Christine calling me a racist because I'm trying to do this to this character? And I think that was one of our biggest fights. That was our like really big, we didn't talk for a while after that. I think there were very tense emails exchanged. And I didn't get it.
And it was really important to me, we rarely, there's so many stereotypes and tropes in terms of the kind of Black characters we see in pulp culture, right? And so it was really important to me, especially when you have the rare opportunity to have what still feels underrepresented, right? Like a certain type of character, Helm, be the lead, in a book, in this case. And I wanted Riley to be all the things that we don't see often enough. She does come from a stable family. She, is driven to succeed. She is, she doesn't have all of these like kind of pathologies that we associate even unconsciously with like, okay, this is the Black experience. This character should be like this. And that what I was trying to tell Joe or make Joe understand is there is a double standard. We could do things with Jen that we couldn't do with Riley because Riley, we're still at this point where characters stand, Black characters are representative, right? They stand for a lot of other characters, and that's a lot of weight, and so it was just, it was different. And we had to talk a lot about why that was so different and why I was so steadfast in turning all these tropes on their heads. Like Riley's family is the safe haven for Jen, flipping the kind of savior complex, right? Of it's not Jen's perfect family and Riley, the Black child having to, to escape there when she needed to.
Right. I think you said there's no Sandra Bullock character in this novel. There's no,
no, there is no white savior. There's no white savior.
So we've got in several more questions. I don't know if we can get to them all. We could do a lightning round, but some of these might require more than a lightning.
Is there a question with a yes or no answer in there?
Oh gosh. How did you divide editing responsibilities?
We both did both.
We both did both. Yeah. Also, whoever had more time, right? So like when we were getting like our rounds of revisions back, it was like we needed to do a read through. One of us would inevitably have more time than the other. It's like, all right, I'll do a first read through. I'll flag things we need to talk about. And then we would set up a call to talk about them.
What's nice about getting to a point, and we're definitely there with, starting in book 2, but it was nice to get to the point when we were even dealing with edits where you just trust the other person's take, right? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you can make this editorial decision. You can, accept or respond to the editor, like just do it. And I'm fine with whatever you kind of decide.
I trust you.
And so we that helped us be more efficient because we both didn't have to do everything together.
And I'm going to blend the final 2 questions together. So it'll be a 2-part. What are some of the racial themes discussed in the book that you two needed to have a longer talk about before finalizing it? And what closely held beliefs were challenged or solidified?
We're ending with the doozies over.
And you've got 1 minute.
I know, at 30 seconds. This is the lightning round, right?
Good luck.
Closely held beliefs that were challenged. I mean, I think I mentioned for me that it was, I think I was challenged in my assumption that people talk about race more than they do. And I think that I also made an assumption, perhaps unfair, that a lot of people who don't talk about race don't care to, right? Like if they're not bringing it up, it's because they don't care or it doesn't affect their lives. This is, I'm speaking of white people here who have the luxury potentially, not having to think about race. And when in reality, and in, some of the conversations we've been having, it's really more of a fear. It's like, I care and I might want to do this, but I don't because of this fear. And so I think I have a better awareness of like kind of the motivations of where white silence comes from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, I really had to look at myself and my life and think about why my worlds have been so segregated. You know, I grew up in a very white town. I went to a very white all-girls Catholic high school. And even when I went to Penn for college, it was a relatively diverse school, but all of my friends weren't just white. They were also white kids who were also from the Philadelphia suburbs. Like, we all played like sports against each other. Or white kids from the tri-state area, mostly. And which Christine saw last night at our book party. She's like, oh, she's like, literally all of you grew up like within 40 minutes of Philadelphia. And I think because people tend to flock to people who are a lot like them. Like, why is it that my friendship with Christine is my first close friendship with a Black woman? And I've had to think about that and think hard about that, and think about ways of expanding my social circle. And I think in a lot of ways that white people now are saying, I want to do this, I don't know how. And that's where our buddy read matchmaking comes in.
The buddy read, love it. All right, well, everybody, you can buy a copy of this book. Go to politicsandprose.com. Make sure you follow Christine and Joe on Instagram. And thank you all. Thanks to Politics and Prose.
Such a treat.
Such a treat. We love Politics and Prose so much. Yes.
Well, it's such a treat to host such a wonderful discussion. I wish we had more time. As Sarah mentioned, the link to the book is in the chat. It'll take you directly to the Politics and Prose website, where you can also click on the events page and check out all of the upcoming author events that we have. In the meantime, I want to thank you all, the three of you, for such a lovely, lively conversation. And to all of you out there in Zoom land, thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time. Stay well and well read. Take care.
Bye, guys.
That was really fun. Thank you. Thank you.
So fun.